Year 1984, while other kids were playing video games, a 12-year-old boy was coding and creating his own video game. He was a genius, different from everyone else, and that's why he had no friends. He was badly bullied, but even then, he didn't give up. Today, March 1998, when 23-year-old Amy Lynn Bradley boarded the Rhapsody of the Seas with her parents and younger brother, the Caribbean sun promised adventure. The warm nights promised joy, but in the early hours of March 24th, something unthinkable happened. Amy stepped onto her cabin balcony, and then she was gone. No splash in the water, no cry for help, no note left behind, just an open sliding door, and an eerie silence that would grow heavier with every passing minute. Her family searched frantically, pleading with the ship's crew to delay docking in Curacao. But within hours, the massive vessel had emptied its passengers onto foreign soil, potentially scattering crucial witnesses and evidence. As days turned into weeks, the theories began. Was it an accident, suicide, or something far more sinister? Eyewitness accounts soon emerged as people claiming to have seen Amy alive, terrified, and accompanied by strangers in tourist bars and brothels across the Caribbean. Could she have been taken by human traffickers? The possibility seemed chillingly real, especially when a disturbing photograph surfaced years later, one that looked hauntingly like Amy, posed in a way that screamed captivity. This is not just a family's living nightmare, a case riddled with missed opportunities, strange sightings, and unanswered questions. Tonight, we revisit the clues, the sightings, and the dark possibility that Amy Bradley's disappearance was not an accident at all, but an abduction into a hidden world from which few ever escape. So how does a healthy, vibrant young woman vanish without a trace? From the middle of a moving cruise ship, surrounded by over 2,000 people, in March 1998, 23-year-old Amy Lynn Bradley was on what should have been the trip of a lifetime. The Rhapsody of the Seas was gliding through the Caribbean, its decks alive with music and laughter. But in the early morning hours, that joy turned to horror when Amy stepped out onto her balcony and never came back. There were no cries for help, no signs of a struggle, just an open sliding door, her cigarettes, and her sandals left behind. It was as if she'd simply been erased from the ship. Over the years, a few unsettling threads have emerged. Unconfirmed but eerily placed a woman matching Amy's description in bars, on beaches, and even in brothels across the Caribbean. Strangers claimed she looked frightened, as if she was being watched. And then came the photograph. A single, haunting image, sent anonymously to investigators, appeared to show Amy older, thinner, lying on a bed, posed in a way that suggested she was being held against her will. The theory that Amy was targeted by human traffickers, abducted in the dark hours before sunrise, and sold into a hidden world from which escape is almost impossible. Tonight, we're going to break down every detail of this baffling case, every sighting, every lead, every chilling clue that suggests Amy's disappearance was no accident. Was she the victim of a tragic, random incident, or was she stolen for a horrifying purpose, one that has kept her hidden for more than 2 decades? The answers may lie in the shadows, and we're about to go searching. The vanishing on the Rhapsody. The Caribbean sun had only just begun to warm the decks of the Rhapsody of the Seas when the unthinkable happened. But to understand the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley, we have to step back to the beginning, back to the moment the Bradley family boarded the ship for what was supposed to be nothing more than a joyful week-long escape. It was March 1998. Ron and Ivor Bradley, along with their 2 children, 21-year-old Brad and 23-year-old Amy, were ready for a much-needed vacation. Amy had just graduated from Longwood University in Virginia, a responsible, vibrant, and determined young woman. She was an accomplished swimmer, a trained lifeguard, and someone with a deep love for the outdoors. Friends described her as independent and cautious, someone who would never recklessly put herself in danger. This was her first time on a cruise. For the first few days, life on board felt like a dream. The family visited Aruba, soaking up the tropical scenery. They wandered bustling port towns, browsed local markets, and savored exotic foods. In the evenings, the Rhapsody came alive with music and lights. Passengers dressed for dinner, the casino rang with the sound of slot machines, and the ship's nightclubs pulsed with energy until the early morning hours. Amy seemed happy, relaxed, and excited to make memories. But beneath the surface, something unsettling was quietly taking shape. The last night, March 23rd, began like any other day on the cruise. Warm breezes, laughter, and family time. But as the Rhapsody made its way toward Curacao, the mood shifted toward celebration. That night, Amy and her younger brother Brad decided to hit the ship's popular dance spot. The Viking Crown Lounge. Music poured from the club, and the dance floor was packed. Amy was seen socializing, dancing with fellow passengers, and spending time with members of the ship's house band, Blue Orchid. She appeared particularly friendly with the band's bassist, Alistair Douglas, known by his nickname Yellow. Witnesses later recalled seeing them laughing together and sharing drinks. According to Yellow, the two parted ways around 1 a.m., but that wasn't the end of Amy's night. She and Brad stayed out, dancing and chatting with other passengers, before finally deciding to head back to their family cabin sometime after 3:30 a.m. The last sighting, in the cabin, their parents were asleep. The Bradleys' stateroom included a small, private balcony overlooking the endless ocean, a perfect place to relax in the warm, early morning air. Sometime between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m., Ron Bradley stirred awake. The sun wasn't yet up. The ship was quiet, except for the faint hum of its engines and the whisper of waves against the hull. When Ron glanced toward the balcony, he saw Amy. She was sitting in one of the chairs, leaning back as if she had drifted off. She was wearing a t-shirt and shorts, her hair loose, her posture relaxed. Ron closed his eyes again, thinking nothing of it. It was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. When he awoke again, this time just before 6 a.m., Mommy was gone. The empty balcony. Ron assumed she had stepped away for a moment. Maybe she'd gone to get coffee. Maybe she was watching the sunrise from another deck. But as minutes turned into more than half an hour, worry began to gnaw at him. Her cigarettes and lighter were missing, but her sandals were still there. She hadn't taken her shoes. And then came the realization that chilled him to the core. She had vanished in a window of less than 30 minutes. The frantic search woke Ivor and Brad. The family began scouring the ship, moving from deck to deck, searching lounges, restaurants. The photograph in 2005, a photo was emailed to investigators from an anonymous source. It showed a young woman lying on a bed, scantily dressed, with a blank, almost resigned expression. Her appearance, her facial structure bore a striking resemblance to Amy. Experts who analyzed the image suggested it could be linked to human trafficking. The setting appeared like a brothel, and the woman looked posed an object rather than a person. Though never confirmed as Amy, the image reignited hope and fear. Human trafficking theory. Could Amy have been targeted while on the cruise? The Caribbean has long been a hotspot for human trafficking, with organized criminal networks operating in ports. Cruise ships crowded with relaxed security, and international waters could offer predators the perfect cover. If Amy was lured or forced off the ship in Curacao, she could have been quickly moved, hidden, and sold, vanishing into a world where victims rarely escape. A family's unending search for over 2 decades. Ron, Ivor, and Brad have chased every lead. They've worked with the FBI, private investigators, and human trafficking experts. They've followed up on tips from strangers and met with supposed witnesses who claimed to have seen Amy alive. But the truth remains just out of reach. The disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley is more than a mystery. It's a warning, a reminder that even in places we think of as safe, danger can strike in the most unexpected ways. She was there, and then she was gone. The question is, who took her, and where is she now? Asterisk, a flawed search and disturbing theories. Panic. That was the only word that could describe the moment Ron Bradley realized his daughter Amy was gone. At first, he clung to the idea that she'd simply stepped away. Maybe she was on deck with her camera, or down at the cafe grabbing a coffee. But minutes turned into half an hour, and half an hour turned into a nightmare. Ron and Ivor began scouring the Rhapsody of the seas themselves. They split up, one heading to the pool deck, another to the lounge, another to the breakfast buffet. Brad, equally frantic, checked the gym, the stairwells, even the lifeboat decks. When they finally alerted ship security, they were met with what the Bradleys later described as a chilling calmness. The first mistake, the Bradleys begged the crew to make a ship-wide announcement immediately, to ask every passenger to check their cabins, their balconies, anywhere Amy could be. But the captain refused, saying he didn't want to alarm the guests. They pleaded for the ship to remain at sea until a thorough search was complete. Again, they were denied. The Rhapsody docked in Curacao, exactly as scheduled. By the time a page for Amy was finally made, hundreds, possibly over 1,000 passengers had already disembarked. If Amy had been taken off the ship, those precious early hours when she might have been seen, identified, or rescued were gone forever. The second mistake. The cabin cleanup. The Bradleys have repeatedly claimed that their cabin was cleaned by staff before any forensic investigation took place. Beds made, floors vacuumed, bathrooms scrubbed, any possible hair strands, fingerprints or fibers that might have offered clues wiped away. This, they say, destroyed vital evidence before authorities even had a chance to collect it. The official search ship's crew members conducted a visual search checking common areas, storerooms, and some restricted zones, but without urgency. The scope was limited. The Netherlands Antilles Coast Guard was called in and searched the surrounding waters for 4 days. Helicopters scanned the sea. Patrol boats circled the area. Divers checked beneath the hull. Nothing. Not even a floating piece of clothing. No body was ever recovered. Theories begin to form when the search failed. Speculation erupted on the ship, in the press, and among investigators. Theory 1. Accidental overboard. Could Amy have leaned too far over the balcony railing and fallen? The Bradleys insist this is nearly impossible. Amy was an accomplished swimmer, a trained lifeguard, who knew the dangers of ship railings. The seas were calm that morning, and no one heard a splash or saw anything in the water. Theory 2. Suicide. This theory was quickly dismissed by those who knew her. Amy was happy, making future plans, and had just accepted a new job. There were no signs of depression. Theory 3. Voluntary disappearance. Could Amy have decided to leave the ship willingly? Again, unlikely. She had no passport, no shoes, no money, and she was incredibly close to her family. Even a sudden decision to leave would have required preparation she simply hadn't made. A sinister possibility emerges with these explanations ruled out. One possibility remained, one the Bradleys had feared from the very beginning. Amy had been abducted. The Caribbean, while beautiful, has long been plagued by the undercurrent of organized crime, including human trafficking. The port city of Curacao, where the Rhapsody docked hours after Amy vanished, has been flagged by international agencies as a known trafficking hub. If Amy had been lured off the ship or forcibly taken, she could have been on another vessel or hidden on the island within minutes of docking. Witness reports in the days following the disappearance. Passenger and crew statements began to surface. Some were vague, others were chilling. One passenger claimed she overheard a crew member say, "They're not going to find her, she's gone." Was this a cruel joke, or the truth, spoken by someone who knew more than they should? A witness also recalled seeing Amy at the nightclub with Yellow, the ship's bassist, in the early hours of the morning, just hours before she vanished. Another said she'd seen Amy dancing and interacting with several unidentified men. The first sightings, within weeks. The first reported sighting came in from Curacao. A Canadian tourist claimed she saw a distressed woman, matching Amy's description, on a beach, flanked by 2 men. The woman appeared to try to mouth the words, "Help me," before being pulled away. Over the next few years, similar accounts trickled in. A Navy petty officer claimed to have seen Amy in a brothel, where she reportedly told him she was being held against her will. Other travelers said they'd spotted her in bars and public areas in the Caribbean, looking tense, guarded, and fearful. The haunting photograph. In 2005, investigators received a photograph from an anonymous source. It showed a woman lying on a bed in lingerie, her expression vacant, her body posed unnaturally. The resemblance to Amy was striking, so much so that the Bradleys believed it could be her. Experts who examined the photo suggested it was consistent with images used in human trafficking and exploitation. If real, it meant Amy had survived for years after her disappearance, but in captivity. Why the search failed. Looking back, investigators and maritime experts point to several key failures. In the search for Amy Bradley, delayed announcements, critical early hours were lost. Immediate docking in Curacao, allowing a potential abductor to leave the ship unnoticed. Cleaning of the cabin, destroying possible forensic evidence. No CCTV review made public. If the ship had security cameras in hallways or exits, the footage has never been released to the public. These missteps not only hindered the investigation but may have ensured that Amy's fate remains a mystery to this day. The human trafficking theory gains strength with so many sightings pointing toward Amy being alive at least in the years following her disappearance. The human trafficking theory became the most widely discussed explanation. The Bradleys believe Amy may have been targeted early in the cruise. Multiple passengers said they noticed crew members watching her closely. She was attractive, fit, and confident, traits traffickers often target to sell victims into high-priced sex markets. Once taken, she could have been kept in hidden parts of the ship until docking, then escorted off as if she were another passenger. The emotional toll for the Bradley family. The hardest part is the not knowing. Every phone call could be a lead or a dead end. Every sighting could be a miracle or a cruel case of mistaken identity. Years later, Ron still remembers the moment he last saw Amy slouched in that balcony chair, the Caribbean breeze moving her hair. That image is frozen in his mind. Ivor clings to the hope that Amy might still be alive, somewhere. Brad has said publicly that the only way the family will ever truly heal is to know the truth, whether that truth brings joy or heartbreak. A mystery that lingers. Amy Lynn Bradley's disappearance is one of the most haunting unsolved cases in maritime history. It's a cautionary tale about how quickly a safe space can turn dangerous, and how even a luxurious cruise ship can become the setting for a life-shattering crime. The questions, chilling sightings, and a trafficking trail from the moment Amy Lynn Bradley vanished in March 1998. The clock began ticking. In missing persons cases, the first 48 hours are critical, but in Amy's case, the possible trail of sightings stretched far beyond those hours, into months and even years. Each new report seemed to offer hope, only to collapse under the weight of uncertainty. Yet together, they began to paint a terrifying possibility that Amy hadn't died at sea at all, that she had been taken to the beach in Curacao. Days after she vanished, the first potential sightings came just days after the disappearance. Two Canadian tourists, vacationing in Curacao, independently reported seeing a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to Amy. One of them claimed they saw her walking along a beach, flanked by two men. The men's body language, they said, was aggressive. The woman, meanwhile, appeared tense, avoiding eye contact, moving in a way that seemed hesitant and guarded. The other tourist's account was even more unsettling. While walking through town, they claimed to have seen the same woman looking out from a cafe window. Her expression, they said, was desperate, like she wanted to call out for help but couldn't. If these accounts were accurate, it meant Amy may have been alive somewhere on the island in the days immediately following her disappearance, but without photographs or physical evidence. Authorities couldn't confirm the reports. The brothel encounter, 1999. A year later, in 1999, a U.S. Navy petty officer came forward with a deeply disturbing story. While on shore leave in Cuba, he claimed he had visited a brothel. Inside, a young woman approached him. She introduced herself quietly. "My name is Amy." Then she begged for help, telling him she wasn't allowed to leave. The officer, startled and unsure of what to do, left without helping her. It wasn't until years later, when he saw Amy's photograph on an episode of America's Most Wanted, that he connected the dots. He contacted authorities, convinced the woman he met was Amy Lynn Bradley. The Navy later investigated, but by then, too much time had passed. The brothel in question had reportedly been raided and shut down. No trace of the woman remained. A pattern emerges, though these sightings were unverified. They fit a grim pattern well known to investigators who work in human trafficking cases. Victims are often moved quickly, kept under control through threats, drugs, or psychological manipulation. And Curacao, like many Caribbean ports, has long been cited as a hub for sex trafficking networks. The idea that Amy could have been taken from the rhapsody of the seas and sold into such a network was horrifying, but it was beginning to look more plausible than any other theory. The shipboard connection. Yellow. The FBI took a close look at Amy's interactions on the cruise, particularly her time with Alistair Yellow Douglas, the bassist from the ship's band, Blue Orchid. Yellow admitted to dancing with Amy in the early hours before she vanished. Witnesses confirmed seeing them together in the ship's nightclub, laughing and talking. But beyond that, his version of events was simple. They went their separate ways, and he never saw her again. The FBI reportedly administered a polygraph test. The results, conflicting reports, have circulated for years. Some say he passed, others that he failed certain questions. No charges were ever filed. Yellow has always maintained his innocence. Still, to the Bradleys, questions lingered. Was Amy targeted by someone on the ship? Was she introduced to the wrong people? Could those people have connections to organized crime in the ports the ship visited? The 2005 photograph, a possible breakthrough years after Amy's disappearance. Investigators received an anonymous email containing a photograph that would haunt everyone who saw it. It showed a young woman lying on a bed, dressed in revealing clothing, posed in a way consistent with sexual exploitation. Her hair, facial structure, and even the distinctive curve of her eyebrows looked eerily similar to Amy's. FBI analysts examined the photo, which appeared to have been taken in a Caribbean location. While they couldn't conclusively prove it, was Amy. Experts in trafficking cases said the image matched those often used in advertising victims for online or underground sex markets. For the Bradley family, it was both a shred of hope and a punch to the gut. If it was Amy, she was alive, but in the worst possible circumstances. The family's desperation. By 1999, the Bradleys had been searching for over a year, following every lead. That desperation made them vulnerable, and it would lead to one of the cruelest chapters in their ordeal. Enter Frank Jones, a Florida man who claimed to be a former Special Forces operative. He told the Bradleys that he had a team on the ground in Curacao, watching Amy's captors. He promised he could rescue her. He sent them reports, photographs, even claimed his men had seen Amy guarded by armed men in a heavily fortified compound. The Bradleys wired him money, eventually around $200,000, to fund the operation. But it was all a lie. Jones never had a team. The photographs were staged. No rescue was ever attempted. He was eventually arrested, convicted of fraud, and sentenced to prison. For the Bradleys, it was another devastating betrayal, draining their finances.